Hello and welcome to the Vine Life podcast. I'm Tony Clark, your host. Today I had the pleasure of interviewing Ann Russell. She's the executive director of the Blue Ridge Women's Center in Roanoke, Virginia. And you may ask, what does the Blue Ridge Women's Center do? Well, the Blue Ridge Women's Center, they improve the health and well-being of women and their families through a medical clinic specializing in unplanned pregnancy, relationships, and reproductive health. Let's give a listen. Okay, today I'm interviewing Ann Russell. She's the executive director of the Blue Ridge Women's Center in Roanoke, Virginia. How are you today, Ann?
Doing well, thank you.
So, Ann, the Blue Ridge Women's Center, let's jump right in here. Can you tell me a little bit about the history and maybe the mission of the Blue Ridge Women's Center?
Absolutely. Blue Ridge Women's Center began as a prayer of several people in the community back in the early 80s that really wanted to see kind of an answer to the abortion industry. How could we be able to help women who found themselves in an unplanned pregnancy, talk to them about their options so that they would be educated about pregnancy. And that's basically where it started. We started as Crisis Pregnancy Center in a little building down the other end of Williamson Road, just as kind of the answer to, okay, here is what the abortion industry is presenting to women in an unplanned pregnancy and making them feel like, this is your option, this is what you can do. And what we were wanting to do was to be able to express, let's talk about all of your options, because abortion is not your only choice. You have other choices. And from there, I believe it was the early 90s or late, let me back up. We ended up in this building on the corner of Williamson and Airport, 94, 95, something like that. And then went medical several years later, meaning that we would do ultrasounds as well. And so now we do the options counseling, pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, STI testing, reproductive grief care support, among other things.
Amazing. So there's more than one option or there's more than one choice. Is that correct?
That's right. And we really want to take back that word choice, because if you really want to talk about choice for women and men, you need to be able to share with them just what all of their choices are. So we know that it is the legal right for a woman to choose to terminate her pregnancy. But with that, she needs to know what that might look like in her life, what kind of procedure she would be having based upon how far along she may be in her pregnancy. We're seeing a huge uptick in what we would call DIY abortions. Basically, they can take the abortion pill at home, and that abortion occurs at home, usually alone in their bathroom. And that can lead to some significant issues emotionally with women. We're seeing women come to us earlier for support and care from termination based upon the fact of what they see when this abortion takes place. She also has that option to make an adoption plan. And we have relationships with different adoption agencies that can come here and actually sit down with a woman and a father of the baby and discuss with them what that might look like for them. And then, of course, there's parenting. And so we offer for them resources and support, not just through pregnancy, but even after that baby is born. You hear a lot in the pro-choice community about pro-lifers and how all they care about is saving the baby. And that's not true. We take a life-centric approach, which is really wanting to see full and abundant life for that mother, for that baby, and for the father of the baby. So we've just begun to kick off a fatherhood ministry because the father of the baby is the person who is going to have the greatest influence on the choice that a woman makes about her pregnancy. So we want to educate him as well.
Amazing. Ann, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be a part of the Blue Ridge Women's Center?
Absolutely. My parents were supporters of Crisis Pregnancy Center, but when I was in college, I found myself in an abusive situation and became pregnant. And my parents immediately made an appointment for me to come to Crisis Pregnancy Center and talk with someone about um, uh, how I was feeling, dealing with the abuse, dealing with rape, dealing with being pregnant, um, to just help me work through that. So my counselor was actually the very first executive director for the Crisis Pregnancy Center of Roanoke Valley, who worked with me for well over a year to just help me to navigate through all the hurt and the pain that I was feeling about my pregnancy. Was I going to parent or make an adoption plan? And I was actually 7 months pregnant when I finally made the decision that the Lord was really telling me that I needed to parent this baby. Um, Years later, after getting married and having more children, I went back to school to get my bachelor's degree. And I immediately I had to do an internship, and my mom said, "Well, why don't you do it at the Blue Ridge Women's Center? That's just like a no-brainer." So I reached out, and sure enough, I was able to do an internship, and I never left. I stayed as a volunteer. Then I went upstairs to work in admin. Um, was a baby bottle person and events coordinator. Then I came down into client services as back then we called them counselors. We now call them client advocates. Moved into the director of counseling services, and then it's coming January next month. 2 years ago, they named me executive director and or CEO. So I am. I feel very honored and blessed that I've been able to serve in so many areas and have experience from client all the way up. Um, I feel like God um, has been preparing me for where He has me now, and I'm very very blessed to be able to be a part of this ministry.
Absolutely. A great, interesting story. And I'm sure over the years, there's a lot of clients that you've met that have really touched your heart. Can you just narrow it down for me? Tell me about one client or one life experience, excuse me, at the Blue Ridge Women's Center that's really touched your heart. What took place there?
Well, if I could, I actually have two different ones, but probably the one that sticks with me the most is actually the client that I met with who was actually living my story. Had been in an abusive situation, found herself pregnant. Um, at first, wasn't sure what she wanted to do with her pregnancy. We had just received these iPads that had an app on it where you could actually um, click on where that client might be in their pregnancy to show them developmentally what's happening. And when we clicked on it, you immediately heard the heartbeat. And she said, "Now, wait a second. What's that?" I said, "That's the heartbeat." And she said, "So you're telling me that my baby's heart is beating right now?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "I can't do it. I can't have this abortion. I have to parent." And we stayed in touch, and just to realize that God wastes nothing. That that my story allowed me to sit across the room from her and really be able to empathize with her and share with her what I felt I needed to hear at that moment when I was a client, and for her to feel hope like I felt as I came. Another client, we are a Christian ministry, and we serve people from all backgrounds, all religions. And I had a girl come in who was actually an atheist. And we sat and we talked about why did she believe what she believed, and then I would share why I, as a Christian, believed what I believed. And before she left, we had made such a connection because she said, "I'd never had a Christian sit down with me and actually be interested in why I believe what I do, and then share with me their faith and why they believe." And she said, "I have a clearer understanding of that now." And so those were the two that really stood out to me, that, we really should be seeing these men and women who walk through our doors as needing to be a disciple of Christ. And Roland Warren, who is the CEO of CareNet, he used that phrase in a keynote speech at one of the conferences, and it stuck with me. We really should be looking at the men and women and children who walk through our doors, that if they do not have a personal relationship with the Lord, then we really want to be able to be the hands and feet of Christ. In the short amount of time they're in here, we don't always really get to give them a full gospel message, but we want to pour into them and develop a relationship so that they can see in dark times for us, this is where we found hope, and give them that opportunity, if they so desire, to come to know the Lord.
So the Blue Ridge Women's Center is open to anyone. You don't have to be a specific from a specific religious background or anything like that. You can be an atheist and still receive the services from the Blue Ridge Women's Center. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly correct. Exactly correct. You look at scripture, and Jesus, he went to where the people were that needed him, that needed to know him and believe in him. And um, we see those people who come in as being they're sinners just like us. But we know what has given us hope in very dark times, and that is having a relationship with Christ. And we don't shove it down their throat. But as I stated, sometimes just being the first positive experience that they have had with a believer is is such a blessing, to be able to be that, for someone to walk out and say, I've never been around Christians that treated me the way that you did, in a non-judgmental way.
And if there's someone listening or watching, excuse me, this podcast, and they're not from the Roanoke Valley, or they're nowhere close to where we currently live, but they're seeking similar services, how would you advise them?
Oh, I would advise them to go to Google and look for pregnancy resource centers in their community. Um, Pregnancy medical clinics or resource centers do not do abortions or give abortion referrals. We give the information so that they can make an informed decision. It's non-judgmental, free of charge. We just want to be there to help them through what's sometimes one of the darkest times in their life. But even if they choose that abortion, most pregnancy centers offer post-abortion support, and to help them navigate through the hurt and the feelings of that loss, because it is a loss. It is a reproductive loss. But just Googling that, and calling that number and talking to someone on that phone to say, hey, I think I could be pregnant. What can you do to help me? That's the first step, is to pick up that phone and make that phone call.
And you mentioned something, even if a woman finds herself in that circumstance and she has had gone through with the abortion, uh, I think it's interesting that you mentioned there's still hope, there's still restoration, there's still forgiveness. Let's speak to that for just a moment. The woman who has gone through, maybe has this in her past. What's the hope for her? How can she be restored to new life?
That's a great question. There are different programs that are used. We use what's called Surrendering the Secret. We have had women in their 60s or 70s that have come in for post-abortion support because they have never told anyone about their abortion. They're certainly not going to go to their church, because so many times you feel that there's going to be nothing but judgment, or people that are just going to throw these arrows at you saying, how could you do that? When really what the church needs to be doing is coming alongside that woman and man, because equally there are many men that have felt that loss. But to be able to come alongside of them and say, there's hope and there's healing in Christ. And surrendering that secret helps them to realize you have a story. You can minister to others who may be afraid to come forward and say anything at all. I know for us, we print off papers that have little pull tabs, and we put them on the back of bathroom stalls at churches or businesses if they would allow us. But we always will pull off one of those tabs before we put them in there, because no one wants to be the first to pull that tab. Even though that's a very private place, but just to know they can pull that tab, call someplace that's non-judgmental, that is going to love on them and help them to see that there is hope, that God can forgive them and will forgive them, and that He will use it to help others who have experienced what they have experienced.
Yeah, there's a pretty famous quote or saying that all of us are for all have sinned and all have fallen short of the glory of God. But there is hope, there is restoration, and Jesus came to die and to be raised again for sinners, just like you and me.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's my understanding that you guys are opening a new facility very soon. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I would love to. I would love to. So we have a relationship with another organization where they are sidewalk advocates. So they actually will stand in front of abortion clinics trying to make contact with those who are walking in, kind of like that last line of defense before the woman walks in that clinic and makes that decision that will change her life forever. And so the organization owns the building directly next door to Planned Parenthood. And uh, they had thought maybe they would open up a clinic there, but I have we have someone who was on our board who made contact so we could kind of get together and discuss. And the decision was made that why reinvent the wheel? We're already doing this. So why don't we go in that building and kind of act as a triage, where if the sidewalk advocates are making contact with someone walking in that building, that they could say, hey, go right next door. They're free of charge. They'll give you information about all of your options. They'll do an ultrasound to see how far along you are, which, by the way, is very important because, our governor has taken away that 24-hour waiting period and the needing to have an ultrasound before that abortion. And that can put a woman's life at risk not doing that. So to have that ultrasound, it tells just how far along she is. So to have them come in there, go through all of this information, do that ultrasound, do STI testing, talk to them about their options, and just be that safe place for them to be able to work through all of that. So we would have a client advocate for her, and we'd have a male advocate for the father, where they could just be able to talk about how they're feeling about this pregnancy. Why do they feel like abortion might be their only option? Are they aware of what their other choices are? And just give them that information to be able to process through all of that.
So someone may be watching or listening to this podcast and they're saying, I love what the Blue Ridge Women's Center is doing. I may not be able to be there physically to volunteer, but I want to donate directly. How would they do that?
Well, probably the best way to do that would be to go to either our supporter site, which is supportbrwc.org. And the other one is blueridgewoman.org. And that is our client page, but we have put a place on there for people who may want to donate. But I encourage people to look at both of the pages so you can see what our clients see, and then you can also see ways that you can get involved. One of the things that we have done, and why I feel it's so important for us to be in this new facility, is because so many women are now taking this abortion pill. And there is a way, if you want to talk about choices for a woman, if she has taken that first pill and she has regrets, there is a possibility it can be reversed as long as they have not taken the second pill. And so we can give them information about the abortion pill reversal. And let them talk to doctors and nurses who could help them navigate through that whole process. So being next door and being able to be right there on the front line for those who have walked out of the building and have taken that first pill, we could be right there next door if they are feeling that, hey, I'm really regretting this decision. I'm thinking that I would like to try to reverse it. So that's another big reason to be in there, and another big reason for people to support us, because to be in that building and to be able to offer these services free of charge, we do depend on the donations of the community, to be able to help us to be there for those greatest in need.
Ann Russell, Executive Director of the Blue Ridge Women's Center. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann, for joining us for the Vine Life podcast. All of the Blue Ridge Women's Center links can be found below. Until next time.